Okay, guys, so thank you so much for tuning in to our second episode of our wonderful podcast. We started with a bang in our first episode, meeting two very superheroes, and we've got two very other special guests in our studio today. I'll start off with my co-hosts. Nazim, how are you, Nazim?
I'm not a superhero then. Okay.
You're not a superhero, no, unfortunately.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Exactly.
We've been downgraded.
This is how I get treated at IslamicHelp.
But our true superheroes here today are Andy and Tina. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great
how are
to
you
be
both
here.
feeling? Andy, you look a bit nervous there.
Well, I need to get started. Once we get rolling, everything will
Tina
be fine.
did say to me you like to talk, so I'm hoping today's session will be good.
Yeah.
Everyone's nervous around Tina.
Is that the effect you have, Tina?
Yep. I've been working with Andy for a really long time, so definitely.
Well, great. Well, maybe you can start there in terms of telling us about how long you've been working with Andy and where your journey started.
So I've been working with, I met Andy at Medical Aid for Palestinians. That's where we worked together, initially as directors. And
How many years ago was that, without giving away your age?
Oh my God. 2018, I think.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Over 6.
Yeah. So we started working there together. I think I started in January, probably. And he was in the field somewhere, and then he rocked up with his little attitude coming into the office as director of programs. And I was like, hello, who are you? And we've been working ever since. He now works with, I'm CEO of an NGO called Interburns, and he's our program lead, and actually now is my maternity cover because I had a little girl 10 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Andy, what was your first thoughts on meeting Tina? Did she give you that attitude, or was there a different story from your side?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think I'd been in Gaza at the time and then came back to the offices in London. And this new firebrand had been appointed as Director of Fundraising at Medical Aid for Palestinians. But joking aside, actually, that was a really seminal moment for MAP as an organisation, because over the next few years, income turnover for the organisation rose significantly. That then meant that as program lead, I was able to develop a whole new batch of programmes in Gaza, in the West Bank and in Lebanon. And the growth was quite exponential during that period of time, despite the escalation of the conflict in 2018, the Great March of Return protests in 18 and 19. We were able to deliver and actually, I think, make quite a valuable contribution even at that point.
I guess as a programs person, I'm a programs person. If you have a fundraiser that's bringing you a lot of money, it's always your best friend.
He used to say he's going to go shopping. That was his thing.
Okay.
He'd be like, how much did you raise? Can I go shopping? Can I go shopping? Can we buy like new equipment? Can we send more teams out? So yeah.
Nazim's only my best friend because I actually work as the head of fundraising here, so our relationship's very similar. Where it's all about, okay, Yasin, how much money have you brought in?
It's the first time in my life I'd ever been in that position. I generally worked with smaller organisations where fundraising, bringing the money in, was always an issue. You were going from one project to the next, from one year to the next. For the first time then, where I was able to sit down with the teams in the field and our partners and think, okay, what do we really want to do over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and make a plan. It was, exciting times.
Shopping was good.
I think it's really interesting. Obviously, fundraising and programs and everything like that. I mean, there's a lot we want to talk about, but just generally just talking about that in terms of, having that room to breathe a little bit and stuff, if you have your programs funded. And I think one of the things that we always get asked is like, we always raise so much money for charity, and like people give so much across the world and everything like that. And they're like, how come nothing's changed? How come, all of these kind of things and stuff. But how do you guys answer that question? Because I have my own views on it, but,
Well, go ahead, programs person.
Well, I'll start maybe. They're good questions, and I certainly understand them, particularly maybe in the context of Gaza, where it feels like the international community has been asked to give and give and give, but you have to then think what is the situation of the people on the ground in Gaza. They've been living under siege, under complete blockade since 2017. They have incredibly few opportunities. There have been regular escalations in the conflict, in the fighting. They deserve everything and more that the world is able to do to support them in that. And yeah, sometimes it's incredibly hard if you see something that you've built up destroyed again during the next round, and you feel that you have to go back to the beginning, but you're never going back quite to where you were before, because there's always the relationships which have been built up, a certain amount of infrastructure that's been built up. You've been training people along the way, so in theory it's always a little bit easier to get back to where you were before, and hopefully then, one of the big phrases in the international world is build back better. It's not just getting back to where you were before. If there are real needs there, what you want to do is actually improve things from the baseline and move forward. And I think that would be my argument, is that the people there, particularly in Palestine, deserve every little bit of support that the world can provide.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess tell us a bit about IDEALS in general. Like, tell us the history about IDEALS, when it was set up and everything.
It's Andy's baby, essentially.
Okay. my baby now, but I feel like I'm the caretaker. IDEALS was set up by the most fantastic person called John Beavis, who was a trauma orthopedic surgeon himself. He was working in Kent, and he had some significant health problems and was forced to take early retirement. And in that early retirement, the first thing that he did is he went out to Sarajevo during the war to help out within the hospitals in Sarajevo. And he went back many times during that particular conflict, made a huge contribution there. And then towards the end of the war, he was travelling out one day on a flight and was sat next to a businessman called Simon Oliver, and they got chatting about what he'd been doing. And at the end of the flight, literally, Simon wrote a cheque for £10,000 and told John he needed to set up his own organisation because he felt that he was the kind of person to make a difference. And that was it. Pretty soon after that, IDEALS was registered back in 2000 with the Charity Commission here in the UK. Since when has worked in Balkans, in South Asia, in the Middle East, Chile for a short period of time as well, and I think has done some amazing things. But I think because of the leadership of John, the person that he was, he could walk into a room not knowing anyone, and within half an hour or so, everybody would be his friend. He was able to build up trust, I think, remarkably quickly, which was an incredible thing to see.
Everyone loved him, didn't they?
They loved him, and he introduced the spirit of volunteers. Everyone still associated with IDEALS as a volunteer. We all have other jobs. One or two people now retired, but we all have other work that we do. Our work with IDEALS is on a voluntary basis. People give up a huge amount of time away from their other duties, time away from their families. But I think that's something to be treasured. Obviously, it keeps your administrative costs down to a minimum. There's no physical office. There are no paid staff, so that's fantastic. Money that comes into the organisation we can spend directly on the work. But also, I think it's not a complete guarantee, but it's almost a guarantee that it's the right people that are coming into the organisation. They're doing it for the right reasons, the right motivation, because they want to help. And I think that's been one of the great things. And it's one of the great things I think about this partnership that we've developed with yourselves, with IslamicHelp, because I feel the same. Yeah. I get the same sense back from everyone that I've been involved with you.
Sounds like a beautiful legacy that John's, left behind. And in terms of numbers, how many volunteers has he kind of inspired to carry on the work with IDEALS?
So there's a core group of 8 who are trustees at the heart of that. But then around that, probably about 30 who are involved, very high level experienced NHS professionals in their own right, surgeons, anaesthetists, physiotherapists, specialist nurses. But there's a bigger group probably around that of people who make the contribution that they can, depending on the time of their lives, their family situation and things. Probably to another 40, 50 people that come and go a little bit. But
I think for me, obviously knowing both of you and everything and learning about IDEALS and stuff like that, that's one of the things that's actually really stood out, the fact that it is all volunteers. and how much you're doing just based on volunteers. It's probably more than some organizations that they have like massive budgets and stuff like that. And you're right, it's about the people that are in it and their passion for it and stuff and everything like that.
Yeah, everyone's heart is in it. You just, nothing feels too hard, to be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, everyone is, it's kind of like a family, I would say, in a way. I don't like using that from, because it can get quite messy, but I really think everyone is just so passionate about it. And I think Palestine is a cause that brings a lot of emotions and passions out, but I think everyone's just shocked at some of the things they have seen or have had their colleagues see, and the injustice that is happening. And I'm sure Rosie and Graham touched upon that. But speaking of volunteers, I am Slovenian and my dad's also a doctor, so we're going to try and recruit some health professionals from there as well, and see if we can get a bit, because at the moment, you know, people can go out only for a month. So we're struggling finding people through the NHS as well that can actually take a month off. So we're going to try and see what we can do in Slovenia as well, whether we can get the ministries to help and hopefully grow the pool of volunteers so that we can help a bit more.
Yeah. That's good news. The more people that can help, the better it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, especially with what's happening in Lebanon as well. It's such a scary environment at the moment.
And the West Bank.
Yeah, and the West Bank. I mean, West Bank is just, I always tell Andy whenever he goes to the West Bank, or whenever I used to go to the West Bank, I would feel more scared in the West Bank because it's so unpredictable. You never know what's going to pop up where. There aren't as many warnings as, you know, whenever I'd go to Gaza, you would kind of know about the security situation, or even if you didn't, you would be warned. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, anything can pop up anywhere. You can just be stopped. You can have, you know, a gun to your head. And every, you know, things like that would happen.
I think me and Andy were talking about it in the car on the way here, and the way that you could see is like, obviously in Gaza you're getting attacked from the outside. It's under siege, but on the inside, everyone there is you know, generally their own people kind of thing. And on the West Bank, it's internal. And it's like, no matter where the Palestinians go, it's just, they just can't win, unfortunately, and stuff in terms of that contrast. Obviously, you both worked in both areas, and it's good to understand that difference that there is, if you want to talk about that, Andy.
Yeah, I was out there with a different project a few weeks ago, and there's fear. It's really changed in the past year. There's fear everywhere within the West Bank. Since the war in Gaza began, there's been a massive increase in violence involving Israeli forces and Israeli settlers in the West Bank as well. We don't really hear anything about that, do we? Or very little. But I think it's nearly 700 people have been killed, thousands injured, over 500 attacks on healthcare alone. But almost more than that, it's constant movement restrictions. It's increased forced displacements of groups of Palestinians from their homes, a massive increase in detentions, including children, young people, adolescents along the way, which just leaves people with this constant state of uncertainty. I've got quite a few friends there as well as colleagues, and we're speaking to many of them from Nablus to Bethlehem to Ramallah.
And even Jerusalem.
Jerusalem to an extent as well. It may be different, there are different issues there. But they go to work or whatever they're doing during the day, and they don't know whether they're going to be able to get back at night. They don't know whether the roads will be open. Their kids go to school, they don't know whether their children are going to be safe at school, whether there's going to be an incident that will happen. A friend who lives in Tulkarem up in the north where there's been the recent major Israeli offensive on the Tulkarem refugee camp and Jenin refugee camp. She says on 3 or 4 occasions now her children have gone to school in the morning and then there's been a complete isolation of the area where they're at, and they've had to stay in the school on an emergency basis that night, not getting back to the following day, on one occasion for a couple of days. I think it's very hard for people here to imagine what that must be like, getting ready in the morning, going out, but not actually knowing. and constantly having to talk to your children about what to do if such and such happens, if there's violence in the area, and just as in Gaza, taking away their childhood really, because it's not possible for them to just go out and play with friends, go around the corner, going in and out of each other's houses, which would be the norm. They just can't do that because they need to be ready.
But they also have two sides. You have the settlers, and then you have the IDF. So there's always something there. You never know what's going to pop up. Whereas this, even for us, I mean, as you know, internationals, as they would say, I never really. You're always slightly on edge. You never know where there's going to be a checkpoint, where you're going to be stopped, where you're going to be asked to get out of the car. You know, and even the traveling through Ben Gurion has never been an easy experience. Not for me, not for people with Arab or Muslim names. It's always been very difficult and not very pleasant.
How is it for you, Tina? Because obviously I remember when we first met, we spoke a little bit about, obviously you used to travel to Gaza quite often, to the West Bank and everything like that. And obviously since everything that's happened, obviously, Andy, you've been back and everything like that, but for you it's different. You haven't been able to go. So how has that been? Because I know you have a lot of like contacts there and friends and people, colleagues.
I mean, I find it really, really, really difficult. I'm not a health professional, so in theory, it's very hard for me to justify to go, but also then with my belly. And, I got pregnant, and throughout my pregnancy, this has been happening in Gaza and in the West Bank and now in Lebanon. And I have so many friends there, and I find it so hard because you can't say, how are you? All I keep saying is, I'm thinking of you. And just this morning I was chatting to one, and, they keep saying, please send the photo of Aya, my baby, just to cheer us up a bit. And, I keep saying, I want, one of the first things I want to do when possible, I want to bring Aya to Gaza, because the people there are just, I don't know how to say it, but they're just so kind. And I've always had such a nice experience, and I have so many friends, and it just breaks my heart to see what they're going through, and to also see that in my mind, they were the strongest people I've ever met. And now they don't want to be strong anymore, and they want to leave, and they don't want that for their children anymore. When in the beginning or in the past escalations or wars, they always wanted to stay, but now I can see it's too much.
Probably hits you even harder because you've got a baby of your own, and then when you see the stories of the children and the suffering, it's quite heartbreaking, isn't it? It literally
breaks me inside. And you text, I wake up at night or when I'm feeding her, and that silence, and thinking about other mothers, or when I think of how difficult I found some of the things within the first couple of weeks, and then thinking, well, they probably, because my mom would always say, you have to eat, you have to sleep enough, so you have enough milk, and then I'm thinking, like, they don't get the sleep, they're stressed, they don't have the food. When you see some of the photos, or you hear the stories of the mothers giving birth, or pregnant women being shot, or those poor babies being malnourished. I mean, malnourishment was so high before already. It's just, I just wish I could hug my friends and take all the pain away from them.
I think for any parent, I mean, I've got 2 little ones, and obviously when this escalation started and stuff, just seeing some of the images, and then you kind of just look at your own children, and you just kind of like, you're like, what's the difference between my children and them children? There's no difference and stuff, and you just like, you just feel blessed that your own children are in a safe place and stuff, but it's just like those people, they don't have that safety. And I literally was like, I can't even fathom what it's like for a parent to lose their child like that and then still stay strong.
It's and even those that are injured, Nazim, like, you think about their future, because you think, houses have been bombed,
Yeah.
schools are gone. What kind of a future are these children gonna have? Some of them have lost, families, loved ones. It's a really, really difficult. I mean, how about yourself, Andy? What sort of challenges have you faced when you've been traveling into Gaza? Are there any stories or anything that you'd like to share?
Every mission that's got in so far, including the first one that I was part of, has had its challenges. But now I look back on the situation when we were travelling out through Cairo and through Egypt and the Rafah crossing and getting in as being almost child's play compared to the complexities involved in now gaining access to Gaza since the Rafah crossing was closed. And the only access for humanitarian aid and for humanitarian personnel is through the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is in the southern part of Israel. When we went out, we travelled out on Christmas Eve, 2023. We were due to enter Gaza on Christmas Day. But because of a major escalation in the security situation down in the south, Rafah was closed that day, so we had to stay near the crossing point, and then actually made it into Gaza the following day. Even then, we couldn't get to the hospital as we planned to do on that first day. We were taken in by our WHO colleagues. They gave us a floor to sleep on that first night before we could then gain access to the European hospital the following day. So already we'd lost a couple of days that we planned to be at the hospital. The subsequent mission had similar problems as well. Each time we've worried about whether the team would get in, what the situation would be. And the level of coordination needed to make what would be a really simple journey is quite astounding. So just to put it into context for people that maybe don't know the area, from the Rafah crossing in the south to Khan Yunis, which is where two of the main government hospitals are, Nas Hospital and the European Hospital, and we've worked at both of those. Should only just be about 10 to 15 minutes in the car. That's all it takes under normal circumstances. But at that point in time, it was taking 36 hours of really intense negotiation, coordination with the UN authorities, who would then liaise with what's called COGAT, which is the coordination arm of the Israeli forces. And then the final bit of the liaison would be with the Israeli forces on the ground to gain clearance and approval to make that journey. And then even when you made it, even though it was such a short space, they'd get halfway, then they'd be held again, waiting for a final clearance from the Israeli forces on the ground before being able to make the final approach to the hospital.
We were on the phone constantly, just being like, okay, they've made it. They're at that checkpoint now. Yeah. Are they going to go forward? Are they not? How are you guys doing? My job was...
Quite a long time. If you think about 36 hours.
Yeah, it was just talking to them. And because different times, different people went in. So there were different personalities, different levels of anxiety, different experience in the past. Yeah. And it's just managing that as well, that element of it.
Has any of the volunteers been denied access and been turned back?
Yes, we had one person denied, and she was absolutely gutted, heartbroken that she couldn't go in.
It was the second deployment, I think, one of the nurses.
A nurse from Scotland. Yeah. And again, no reason given. Yeah. At that point in the process was when we were dealing with the Egyptian authorities. It was the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs gave the first level of approval, but then actually it went to the Israelis to give the final security approval as to who would be allowed to make the journey through to the crossing and then get in. And then there were multiple checkpoints between Cairo and the crossing, and then a final check at the crossing itself before getting in. But yeah, she was denied approval, so she stayed in Cairo for a couple of days, and
they thought they'll try again,
and
then it was really hard for her because she wanted to go so bad, and she felt guilty and that she didn't go, but she was such a trooper. She even raised some money in the hotel, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. Bless her.
Bless her, yeah. She started chatting to people, and
she stayed engaged since then, and still is a
and brought
regular,
back some dollars.
a regular contributor on the chat.
It's
But
like we say, everyone has to be a fundraiser.
Oh my
isn't
God,
it?
literally. She called her, she said, Tina, I have dollars. I said, what do you mean you have dollars? I was chatting to this person and I got money. She was just absolutely lovely. And then she wanted to go volunteer as well when she was there. I mean, like I said, everyone has such a big heart and everyone just wants to help in one way or another. Even her, a great example, she was so sad that she couldn't go in. But instead of that, she found something else to do and other ways to contribute. And
yeah. She's the only one that's been denied who's been part of a plan team going in. But it's maybe important to point out that things have also changed since, as I say, the only access has been through the crossing in the southern part of Israel. There are far fewer places on the convoys now, so far fewer people can get in and out than before when access was through Egypt. Significantly less health aid, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later, the equipment side of things. But the other thing that they've added in is another question on the application form that you need to submit to get the clearance, and that is about whether or not you have any Palestinian heritage. And we have quite a few members of our team from Egypt and Jordan who are British nationals. They have British passports now, but parents or grandparents were Palestinian. So people who have been on the previous missions now aren't able to gain access because those with Palestinian heritage are denied.
I know those people and I know how passionate they are.
It has been very, very difficult explaining to them that they just cannot go, that it's not safe, that they're going to get, that even if we get them in, if by some way that they get approval, we might not get them out. And that's the part that has been the most difficult, telling them, we have a duty of care for you. We don't want to be in a situation when you're in Gaza and we can't get you out. You have families as well. You have to think of that.
But it's for one of our senior volunteers, particularly a trauma orthopedic surgeon. It's actually been quite devastating. You know, he'd been on 2 of the previous missions, made a massive contribution to the work there, incredibly valued, trusted. Everyone was looking forward to him going back again. He'd given up such a lot. He has a Jordanian passport as well as a British passport, but Palestinian grandparents. And it's really affected his mental health. He's really struggled with the fact that he's not able to get back in at the moment, and desperately waiting for an opportunity when maybe that circumstance will change, or Rafah crossing reopens and we're back again, maybe negotiating through the Egyptian authorities.
I think that goes back to what you were saying about the people that you have involved in Ideals and their passion for it, and something like that, it shows their passion. One of the things I wanted to kind of get into with you guys especially, and I was actually really glad that we've done the 2 podcasts, the one with Dr. Graham and Dr. Victoria, where we've spoken a lot more about, I guess, the kind of individual trip going out and stuff like that. I think the thing that I've mentioned to Yasin and these guys is about, this one is going to be very interesting because we're talking to the guys who are overseeing the whole operation, and I wanted to delve into that a little bit in terms of what's that like. Obviously, Andy, you went on the first one as well, but both of you are kind of like operation leads for the whole thing. And, for
He's
you guys,
aged me. Mission 1, when he was out there, he aged me. Well, they aged me, the whole team.
For you guys, you're kind of sitting back. You're not sitting back, obviously. A to Z is your responsibility, but then you're sending the teams in. And it's a different thing, and obviously within all of that there's logistics, there's challenges. I know because Tina, like when we talk to each other quite often, like Tina's one of the best communicators that I've ever worked with and stuff, especially like even in the other roles that you've had and stuff like that, from a fundraising perspective, like keeping everyone in the loop. Tina is like just on it, like that kind of thing and stuff. So
I'm not sure I'm their favorite person when they're in the field, and I'm just one more photo, just one more video, please.
Actually, you say that, but actually I think you absolutely are their favorite person, and I can speak personally for myself. When I was there, it always felt to me that there was someone on my back. Just, whatever happened, there would be someone also on the outside. I knew there would be more people trying to help, but as a first point of call, it always sort of felt that you would do. You would move heaven and earth to make sure that anything that could be done from the outside was done.
I was a bit of a nightmare for
No,
those poor people
but that makes
at the UN.
a big difference. And even with respect to the video pieces and things, to be honest, historically, I've hated doing that stuff, and I've been really bad at doing it. We haven't really engaged with social media in the past. We haven't really spoken about our work in Gaza that goes back to 2009. And part of that was because of concern about our access, that if we did speak out, maybe that would compromise our access moving forward, because that was through Erez crossing in the north through Israel, and needed Israeli approval as well. But partly it's just because none of the group really were that comfortable in engaging. But I found when I was doing the pieces in the European hospital, it was actually quite therapeutic. When I had the opportunity, gave me a chance to actually sit down and think about what was going on. How was it affecting me? Then trying to articulate that a little bit in the piece, and that was actually quite valuable, rather than just storing it up, and not necessarily having an outlet for it. The thinking about what you might be sort of saying, and then actually saying it, it was actually quite helpful, and hopefully helpful in terms of communicating to the outside world what we were doing, and have something that we could then look back on afterwards and use for fundraising and other things. But actually found it personally helpful. And I've spoken to Graham and Rosie. They were amazing during this last mission, weren't they? And they did a piece, a little podcast almost together every day for the time, and then sent it through.
It was quite funny because I'd get all of them, and then at one point he's like, "Can you please send me some? I feel really left out."
Yeah, I did. I felt quite left out for a bit.
And I was like, "Well, I'm sorry."
But it was really helpful for them. And both of them independently have said exactly the same thing. But actually, just doing that, thinking about it, reflecting on the day, it was almost an opportunity to put it to bed, and then go to bed that night, sleep, get up and do the day again the following day.
It must be really difficult seeing what you're seeing on a daily basis. So it has a lot of impact on your mental, psychological side as well, doesn't it?
It does. And then when you know these people quite well, they go out there, and also some of the doctors or health professionals in Gaza. It is really difficult. For me, we have a group chat as the core, and then each mission has a chat. And then I also have a chat with, my job is to chat with them separately as well. Say good morning, good evening. And with the time difference, with me being at home breastfeeding, I'd be like, how are you guys? Good morning. Are you getting ready? And it was quite funny. Rosie, when she came back from Gaza this time, she went on holiday, and she texted me one morning, and she said, "You know what? I miss you. I don't get like 3 a.m. texts from you. Good morning. How are you doing? What are you up to? Are you ready for the day?" It's really important to kind of just check in on them, really, because you understand that they're having difficult days, and it's just that little bit of banter sometimes, teasing them, joking, sending, a silly photo, just to boost their spirits a bit every now and then, to kind of get them out of that horrible feeling that they're having, or a bad day. Especially now, I think, because they were out for a month.
Of course.
It's a lot. And I don't think either of them understood, or I always thought it was going to be really difficult, but they're so hardcore. But I think even for them, that 1 month was a lot.
Yeah, and I remember, I think the first mission, and when we were having comms about the team going in, I remember speaking to Tina. Obviously she was very worried at the time. Andy, you went in and stuff and everything. I think Andy, Graham, Basil and Ahmed Kafafi, and stuff. All amazing people. Met all of them at the dinners and everything like that and stuff. I remember speaking to you, Tina, about it. I know you were very worried.
I was worried. Remember when I thought we weren't going to get them out?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. That's what I was going to ask you. There's a few times, like, were there times where you just like, what's going on? Really, really worried, or like really kind of times of, I guess, a little bit of peril and stuff that you remember? I
mean, there definitely were, especially on the first mission. We didn't know how it was going to be. And I reported every basically kilometer they made in. we're in touch the whole time. But it was that moment when the UN or WHO, I'm not sure who called. I think it was like 7-8 p.m. They were like, there were problems with the taxis, remember?
Oh yes,
Yeah,
I remember that.
And Naz and I were communicating, saying we're getting them out no matter what. Andy didn't even know at that point because he was the lead inside. And I remember calling this man from the UN, and I was like, I'm going to call you at 1 a.m. They are leaving. I don't care. Someone's going to be there at the border. And we were chatting till God knows 2, 3 a.m. thinking how to get them out.
That they were not going to get out at that point. I think because you guys were in surgery or something, and Tina could have got in touch with you.
Yeah, and you had that horrible case, didn't you? That
yeah. Well, that final night. I mean, irony of ironies, really. Some of the MAP staff were injured really quite badly. And one of the program officers, she lost one of her children, several other relatives in a shelling of the supposedly safe guest house that they were staying in, and she and her sister and her 2-year-old daughter were brought in for our team to be working on. The 2-year-old had a really nasty head injury, so I was coordinating with the neurosurgeons at the hospital there for her care. And the person that we knew from the MAP team and her sister had really, really nasty pelvic and thigh injuries. So it was just why our team were there. So they were operating on the two of them until the early hours of the morning, completely oblivious to.
And I was like, we are getting
activity.
them out now. So we are getting them out no matter what. I think they thought I was completely insane at the UN because I just called every single person that we had, and I was like, they're coming out, especially because it was our first mission. Everyone, your families, everyone, it was a lot of anxiety around it, stress, fear. And then you went over Christmas, and the thought of not getting you guys out kind of wasn't an option. But I do remember that. I was at the end when you were out, I was like, oh my God, those people at the UN must think I'm an absolute loon. Because I was like, we're getting them out no matter what. What are you going to do? Sort it out.
And how did they react to that?
Oh, I think the man just thought I was crazy at some point because I was like, you need to, I don't know if I can. Well, you will. Tell me what we're going to do. We're getting them out. It's not an option. They need to come out. And I can't, I was seeing them because I went to the airport when you guys landed. It was just, just hugging them. And I remember Graham's face. He was just smiling and it just felt,
He didn't realize how much headache he put you through.
Oh my goodness, that man. Oh, he's brilliant,
Probably, to be honest, none of them really quite understand the full extent of what goes on behind the scenes. And that's fine, because to a degree, we want to protect them from that. I mean, they're incredibly experienced people who are capable of doing amazing things in the operating theatre and in the outpatient departments. And that's what we want them to be able to focus their time and energy on.
Is it difficult sometimes? I guess, obviously we spoke to Rosie earlier, and I remember when we were talking about the last deployment, the challenges that were there with the restrictions and everything like that. Which I think when we were talking about it, it is difficult because obviously when people go out, they want to do as much as possible because they want to make use of the time, the fact that they're flown out and everything like that. But then at the same time, I guess maybe you guys sympathize with like the partner organizations that put those restrictions because
you do sometimes, and you have to at the same time that like our volunteers are additionally stressed, and it's so managing them and managing the partners can be challenging sometimes.
But there is an understanding because coordinating a movement, I talked about the 36 hours to be able to get people in and out. That was at a time when our teams were staying in the hospital when we got there. So it was only the one movement getting in and then the movement getting out. Very stressful, time consuming, but it was only one in, one out. We weren't having to do that on a daily basis. This latest mission, they were staying in the guest house with our partner organisation, MSF. And then having to be driven to the hospital and back again every day. So every one of those journeys had to be coordinated by their local team on the ground. It's not easy. at all to do that, but they have a team around them, working sort of full time, some within Gaza, some outside Gaza, to make sure that happens. So it felt better, the fact that there was this dedicated team of people rather than purely relying on us on the outside to do it.
That's the most dangerous part, essentially. You're less likely to be hit within the hospital.
Within the hospital, almost than anywhere else.
Up and down really was the biggest stress, even for the team, even in the first missions. That was the hardest part, getting them in and out, just breathing and waiting. And like Andy said, those journeys, I remember when we were in Gaza, it's nothing, We could probably even run it now, but how close EGH is to Nasser, I remember they're super close, and now it will take forever to move from one to the other. And the time that you are me in London, Andy, in Sheffield, and just sitting there and just looking at the time, we haven't heard, have you heard, Andy? I haven't. Have you heard, Tina? No. And it's just that waiting just feels never ending.
How do you go about, because there's a lot of logistics that are needed in terms of planning, especially from our viewers' perspective, what do you need to do in order to plan these missions? Or is it sometimes certain aspects you just go with the flow because there's things that are just out of your control? I mean, what's involved in planning one of these missions?
I mean, there's a lot of planning, but the thing is, you have to know that at any one point, that planning can go out the window and you start from scratch. There's, it's very unpredictable what's going to happen the day, the hour, the minute. You never know when something is going to change, whether that is on the ground or whether that, when they're there, or whether it's when it comes to the partner, when it comes to certain rules, regulations keep changing, requirements keep changing.
But with a timeline, maybe, to put it into perspective a little bit, from that first mission over Christmas and New Year, we had teams at the European hospital for 2 weeks, every month for 4 months. So we were trying to plan the teams at least 3 months ahead, as to trying to make sure that we had the right teams, the right people, the right set of skills to go in. And then when a team was there, obviously it was intense focus on them for that 2 weeks. As soon as they got back, we were starting the intense planning for the next team going in, liaising with the UN, liaising with the World Health Organization, who are coordinating the emergency medical teams getting in and out, together with the Ministry of Health within Gaza itself.
And at that point, Andy, we also had the equipment.
And then that's the other bit. It's not just getting the people in. It's probably worth talking a bit about that. It's also, this is a really specialist area. So if we start at the beginning, in terms of those people who survive major trauma in Gaza at the moment and in any conflict situation, 80% of them, their major problem is a limb injury. So yes, there are head injuries and there are chest injuries and there are abdominal injuries, but 80% of survivors from any conflict, their major problem, it may be accompanied by burns as well from the explosives that have been used, are a major limb injury. So a traumatic amputation, or such a bad injury that had to be converted into a surgical amputation of a limb, or the most horrendous fractures that you have to clean, stabilize, and then slowly reconstruct that limb over what can be a journey of years and multiple operations for many of those people. So as well as the human expertise, there's the specialist kit, and we've had this conversation many times before. It's not something that you can make, do, and mend with other bits and pieces. You need the specialist kit to be able to do that work, the reconstructive process. It's expensive, that's one thing. We've talked before about a single nut and bolt there.
God,
you're talking about hundreds of pounds just for that, and then you've got thousands of those, and the frames and the implants and things that go alongside that. The one great thing, obviously your support was incredible to begin with, so we could get some of that kit together and make sure that the teams were properly equipped. But in the beginning, we were sending on average teams of 4 people, but they were taking up to 25 suitcases off equipment with them. Yes, they had their personal stuff in there and some food supplies to help support them as well. But that was guaranteeing that we were able to transport not only the people, but the kit that they needed to do their work for the whole 2 weeks, but also to replenish the stores in the hospital so that in between times they were able to carry on that work, because there were other teams there that could use that. And at that time, going in through Africa Crossing, we were able to, that was fine. We were doing that. We were providing all the kit that we needed and replenishing the hospital stores at the same time.
And each type of specialist, whether it was a plastic surgeon, an anaesthetist, or an orthopod, each one would make sure that they have the right equipment with them to be able to operate. And then for when they leave also that there's things there.
And then negotiating with our friends and colleagues within the hospital as to what were their priorities at any one time, to make sure that we were trying to address those as well. So that was almost a full-time occupation in itself, but we were able to do it. Now, not only are there far fewer people allowed in and out through the Karam crossing, for deployment for a whole month, so just think about that, what you need for a month, each person is allowed to take one standard suitcase and a small backpack with them. That's it. They can't take anything else. And it's strictly monitored. Anyone trying to take anything more than that is stopped, and how they don't get access, even if they're on the approved list. Now, within that, you can maybe take 1 or 2 pieces of equipment, a very small equipment set that is clearly for personal use, but it has to be contained within those restrictions, and you have to have enough space for for your own personal items necessary for surviving for a month as well. So it essentially means that no teams, and it's not just us, so all the other emergency medical teams that are involved there, the UN agencies are in the same boat. So the only option then is to, in parallel, find a way of getting the equipment into Gaza. But there are huge problems with that. Firstly, you're trying to get equipment in there all the time. You know the headaches involved. It's an incredibly bureaucratic process. It's been made much worse since the Rafah crossing was closed. Even if you can find a mechanism to get the stuff in, just getting into Gaza isn't enough. Because it will go to a warehouse in Gaza, but then
you have to find it from there as well.
But then you have to find it from there. You have to transport it from there safely to wherever the health facility, and match up it getting to the right health facility at the time that your team is going to be there.
Because it might not be, because things change.
And right until the last moment, our team might be deployed to a different facility or to a different hospital. So you can
So we don't really choose where we go. We get
complexity.
guided by WHO which hospital to go to.
And the ministry,
so it's not nothing is simple. So we can have equipment in one place, in theory, if we get it in, but our team in another place. So it's
tricky.
As you'll hear.
It's interesting because I remember like when Tina called me about this project, I was actually at a conference in London, an MCF one, MSF, and stuff. And I remember I spoke to you, and then I was like, oh, let's have a phone call and everything like that. And I think ever since we had this conversation begun, I know that Tina's obviously the great communicator that she is. Everything she says, if everything goes well, that's what she always says. If everything goes well, with that, I'm like, Tina, it's okay. We know there's a conflict there. We know what's going on. We know that maybe it's gonna go against the.
Because there's always
but
something.
She always put that little disclaimer in, and so I was just like, Tina, you don't have to say that. We understand.
Glad to hear it.
I know, because there's always some, and like with equipment, we always have, every time we meet as a team, we always talk about. Plastics seem to be a lot easier. Like Rosie always...
The kit is smaller.
The kit is smaller and it's less complex. They can do surgeries. They just need stuff to do the surgery. They don't actually need stuff to stay inside your body. But when it comes to orthopedic, whenever... And I've gotten to know it quite well now. But whenever we talk to the surgeons, what, like, again, we said we want to buy more stuff. What do we need? It's never straightforward, because if you need this, you need that, and they might not have this, and we need. For us, it's not just buying it. We also need to know what's already in Gaza. In EGH, we need to know what's in Nasser. So we, at the moment, actually have someone in Gaza, in EGH. So he will be tasked to go around and see what is still there.
And I think that's what's like when we set up the partnership with you guys, the one thing that I was saying to our teams was, we're working with one of the best teams, one of the teams that has a vast amount of experience of working inside Gaza. And like you mentioned, those networks that you have with the hospitals, with the Ministry of Health, it means that whatever you identify as the need is the need, because you're literally talking to those people and not kind of guessing from from third party kind of needs assessment or whatever it is or anything like that and stuff. So that's all very important in terms of, it's not just about sending the medical aid in, sending the right technical medical aid in, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is everyone wants to go in. You know, you speak to so many people, oh, I'll go in, and you're like, yeah, but you're not what is needed most urgently now. Orthopods and plastic surgeons, and for burns experts, those are the things that are really, really needed when you look at...
We've had loads of people, like...
Oh, yeah, when you were sending us stuff.
Yeah, we've had some, like, not just that, like, just normal people. Obviously, they all want to go help. Obviously, from a good place and everything like that.
I want to go, but I know that I won't be... It's funny, Rosie really wants to send her to... She says she can go for as long as... She can stay even longer, 6 months, if her partner Philip can come. Because, you know, I desperately want to go, but I know I'm not the priority. I mean, even you desperately want to go, but...
Yeah, I mean, it has been one of the things that's been quite hard for me from many perspectives since that first mission, because particularly now that the numbers are so much less, it is only those people directly involved in delivering life-saving aid that can get on those convoys to get in and out. So whilst I could find a place, I can't really, because we have to prioritise those for the trauma orthopaedic surgeon, the plastic surgeon, the anaesthetist to go in there when they're so precious that the places that are available, and wait for an opportunity, I think, just for things to open up a little bit more, access to improve a little bit before I go back and reassess the situation on the ground. I'm a little bit more hopeful on the equipment side of things. We've not even had a chance to talk about this ourselves as yet. So I went to the Gaza Health Initiative conference in Amsterdam. I don't know whether you heard about that, which was a couple of Fridays ago. So that was bringing together multiple organisations, including the relevant UN agencies who have been involved in the response in Gaza so far, but also thinking about the future, what happens post-ceasefire and how can those organisations work together. So important for us to be part of that at this stage. But one of the presentations was from the head of procurement and logistics for an organisation called the Jordan Hashemite Charity Organisation.
So we're working with them.
You're already working with them. So it was great for me to make that introduction, because I'm now following up on that, because they can get equipment in free of taxation and free of customs duty, and have a mechanism in place to actually get that stuff into Gaza. And they said there should be no issue in terms of also signing an MOU with IDEALS, or together with IslamicHelp to get that health equipment in, and try and make sure not only getting in, but as we talked about, getting to the right place at the right time.
It's funny, we haven't had our own catch up. We can't have everything on the podcast now. But
Sorry, I was just about to say, I'm just looking at the time. It's about nearly our prayer break, so maybe we can continue after the break, just for 10 minutes if we pause here, and then we'll continue, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a lot more.
I'm going to go see my daughter.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So, welcome back, guys. We're going to get stuck straight back into it. So, Andy, we're going to roll back the years, and I'm going to go back to your childhood. Okay, I know you're looking at me thinking, "Oh, what's he going to ask here now?" So
it's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago.
So, tell me a bit about getting into the medical field, and what through your childhood, was this like a choice that you wanted to kind of go into, or did you have other plans as you were growing up as a child?
I wish I could say it was all a big plan, but it really wasn't. I didn't have any clear idea growing up what I wanted to do. There were no medical people in my family or amongst close friends or anything like that. And career advice, it was a long time ago, and career advice was pretty minimal at that time. And I remember just going to one of those sessions with the career advisor, who was also my maths teacher, and saying, I don't really know what to do. I don't know about going to university. And he said, well, it's possible that you could get the grades to go into medicine. And I hadn't even given it any thought up until that point. And so I fell into it in a way, and I was lucky enough to get the grades, although they wouldn't be anywhere near good enough to get into medical school these days, because it's become so competitive. And I'm not a scientist by background. That's not really my strength. And I struggled in the early years where it's very science heavy at medical school. But just gradually, as progressed through, and it became more clinical, and starting talking to patients and their families, then I began to feel more comfortable with the whole thing. But it really wasn't until I went on my elective period. We were lucky enough to get this elective period of 3 months where we could go anywhere in the world, as long as it was linked somehow to your medical education. And I went to a community health unit in the south of India, in a very remote place there. It was linked with the Christian Medical College in Vellore, but it was a community health unit about 40 kilometres out from any town or anything.
Was that the first time you had travelled abroad?
And that's the first time I travelled abroad, so it was a real shock to the system on so many different levels. There were 2 buses that came out to this area per week, and it would be a case of, it might come that day, and you'd go and you'd wait at the bus stop and hope that at some point during the course of the day the bus would come along. But it was they hadn't seen a white person in that particular area before, so there was a real Pied Piper feel just going around, and the children would follow. But for me, it was the first exposure to the fact that life isn't fair, that everyone in the world doesn't have the same access to stuff that I'd probably been taken for granted up until that time, whether that was in terms of education, healthcare, welfare support, whatever, economic opportunities, whatever that might be. And without being too dramatic about it, it was a life-changing moment for me. It made me think about things probably for the first time in my life. I had my 21st birthday while I was there, so that was quite late, I think, and I think I'd been particularly naive before that, hadn't really given it much thought. But it was a hugely important period for me to see that, to work with some incredibly dedicated local doctors and the nursing team and the people, the community volunteers who supported that unit, to see what they were able to do in the most challenging of circumstances. And from that point forward, it was always there at the back of my mind as to how I might be able to combine my medical career with making some kind of contribution to developing health services.
Do you get many people, asking you about career advice now that they see you as somebody to be inspired and looked up towards?
Loads.
Do you get many people coming to you and saying, "Hey, Dr. Andy, how about this?"
They did at the events, the fundraising events. There was always a queue of.
Yeah, I used to remember that.
Right, there was always a queue of students or people that.
A queue of women.
Yeah.
Just around.
I was going to say women, but then I tried to behave.
You're going to get him into trouble on this live show.
Big trouble. Yes, I do, and actually I go and talk to medical students and nursing students quite a bit, trying to just maybe getting them to consider things that they hadn't, and I hadn't at that stage in my career been thinking about. Not necessarily to convince people to do that, but just to be aware of it and to think about making a contribution as and when you can.
What advice do you give them?
To have probably more of a plan than I had. As I say, it was a very circuitous route, but now I look back at every stage, everything that I did, and nothing was wasted. All the experiences that I've had in different disciplines, in different parts of the world, I think help me now to try and sort of be as effective and efficient in the role that I have within the charities that I work with. But I think along the way I've maybe developed some idea as to the short courses, the longer term courses that might be really helpful for people, the career paths that they might want to consider depending on what kind of contribution they think that they might be able to make. So I have much better advice. It would be great to be able to speak with my with my younger self now, with the experience that I've built up and the knowledge that I have, probably would have made the journey a little bit easier for myself. But hopefully, I can share some of that now and make that journey a bit easier for other people.
Definitely. What about yourself, Tina? Would you like to see your daughter Aya follow Mummy's footsteps in the near future?
Oh,
That's a deep question.
I know it is, since she's just 10 weeks old.
Putting
Or a
all the
golfer or a
pressure on a
tennis player.
10-week-old.
Well, yeah, why not? I mean, I think I love my job, even though in theory I am on maternity. I love working, and I've always, my dad said to me, I don't care what you do as long as you're happy. And I really am happy with what I do. So I would really want her to be happy. And my parents did a lot of humanitarian work themselves. My mom's a nurse and my dad's a surgeon. So, ever since I was small, my sister and I were always, volunteering is very important. Charity work's very important. So I do hope she gets a bit of that from me, and also does something that's meaningful.
Do you think it was your parents that were your role models as you were growing up?
Definitely, 100%. Yeah. We grew up I grew up in the Middle East, and the Gulf War really affected me, and then the war in the Balkans. So yeah, I was subjected to injustice and violence at quite a young age already, seeing it. And it's always stuck with me, and I always wanted to make a difference, and now I hope I can.
Yeah, we've been speaking a lot about on these other episodes that we've been doing with some of our own staff and everything like that, about working in this sector and stuff. How have you found it? Because I know your journey. You've gone from like fundraising manager to CEO of big organization, MAP, everything like that as well. How you found your like career kind of thing?
It was really random. So I graduated from high school. Wanted to go study design, and then architecture, and then fashion, and then advertising. Ended up in marketing and comms. Came to London to do my master's in film and media, and then was a flatmate with people who did international development, and I was like, I don't want to do that, I'll swap to that. And then randomly applied for a first job to become a fundraiser. And because of my marketing background and comms, I got the job, didn't really know what fundraising was. And then thought, okay, I quite like this, asking people for money. My dad said I was born for it. That I used to.
Your dad said he was born for it. Okay.
I used to go to a shop and be like standing there. He'd say you could have one Barbie, and I'd always leave with at least 3. So,
but it's true though. I've worked with a lot of fundraisers, and I've never come across someone more comfortable asking people for money than you.
Yeah, and then
pushing the envelope higher and higher and higher.
I know. He's always like, Tina. And I'm like, what? If we don't ask, we don't get. Stop it. So we always, even now, when we work together at Interburns or Ideals, he'll do the concept note if we do it together. And then I always oversee the budget or do the budget.
And it's always different when it comes back to me.
And then sometimes he's like, can I now see what you finally submitted? So, yeah, but I do love... Yeah, I love fundraising. But I do love being a CEO as well.
And you are good at fundraising, because I remember when we sat down to plan the fundraising dinners, we sat down with our head of fundraising at the time, Torres, and I remember this conversation. And Torres, amazing guy, love the guy and everything. And I think we were like, so Tina asked the question, so how many fundraising events are you going to do? Torres was like, we might do 1 or 2. Yeah. Tina was like, 1 or 2? You could do about 10 of these and stuff. And we're like, okay, all right, then, fair enough. We kind of ended up doing that as well, and it worked out really well.
I know, and I was like, how much are you going to raise? And it was so small. I was like, seriously? No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, Tina's definitely born for fundraising.
Yeah.
Talking about dinners, Nazim, I think you've got a question about the charity moment, haven't you? Part of our first segment of this podcast. Do you want to touch on that while we're on that subject now?
Charity Moment is a segment in the podcast that we do for all of our guests, basically. So we just want to ask you guys, about one special moment working within this, this field, something that's really stuck with you. It doesn't have to be Gaza, it could be anything general. Whatever you feel like, whatever first comes to your mind, when you think about working within this sector, and we're blessed to be in this position, that's the way that we see it. And there's so many memories that we have that make all of the headache, all of the stress, all of the difficulties, like make it all worthwhile. So who wants to go first?
You go, because you talk more.
You go first while I think about it.
No, you talk more. You go.
It's a really good question, and the good thing is it's quite difficult to narrow it down to one. But I'll talk about something in Pakistan. So with Ideals, I worked in Pakistan for a long time with a wonderful local partner there called CAMP, Community Activation and Mobilization Personnel. And the base was in Peshawar in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, but we did quite a lot of work within the tribal belt there. Also Pakhtun, but obviously huge challenges there. And maternal child health indicators in the tribal area were appalling. And it was really difficult to find people to support that side of things within the tribal area, because women were really only allowed to see a female doctor or a female midwife, but there were very few of them prepared to work in those areas. So we were sitting down with a lot of the elders from together with a local partner, trying to work out how we could begin to do something about that. And the idea grew of trying to train a cohort of community midwives from within the villages in the key areas themselves. But then there were huge problems with that, because we couldn't really deliver the training within the tribal area, and very difficult for those young women to leave the area and go anywhere else. So eventually we linked up with a nursing school within Peshawar, and we built a separate block within the nursing school, so that young women that were recruited for this program could come in with a couple of family members, so that and they lived together in this area. And we managed to recruit 30 with the first cohort. Oh. They were trained over an 18-month period. I'm not to say there weren't challenges along the way and some difficulties that we had to overcome, but my moment would be the graduation ceremony for the first 30. To see and to be able to talk to the young women themselves about how, and I'd seen them intermittently along the way, and how they had grown and how they developed. And the confidence that they had at that point, and the pride in being this first group of women to go through, and then to be going back to their villages, supported by a unit within Peshawar itself, but also the family. Large numbers of the local communities came to the graduation, and the thing that stands out the most, and probably, if we allow pride, my proudest moment in this sector was attending the graduation ceremony with that group.
How was that like in Pakistan? Because even for ourselves, I'm from my family's from Pakistan and everything. Going to some of those areas, they are quite conservative. They have traditional values, and they have their own customs. And working within this sector, we have to understand that wherever we go. It's one of the criticism against the sector, especially in the West. Trying to impose our Western ideologies and everything like that. So even for us, even when we go into these communities, kind of like trying to work around, the fact that you had to, create a separate section and everything like that. How was that kind of experience?
Everything that I've done, really, I learn. I regard this work and being involved in it as a huge privilege. Yeah. It's taken me to some amazing places. I've met some amazing people. Being able to be involved in some, hopefully some transformative projects. But you're always learning, and I think that's maybe the perfect reminder that you don't know everything. This is not a case of someone coming in from the outside and telling or demonstrating that this is the way to do things. It's if you are able to bring any expertise from the outside, and if you can bring some funding to support something, but you're working with local people. We couldn't have done that. We couldn't even begin to do that without the local partner who was based in Peshawar, understood the area, not just the logistic support of things, but the cultural, contextual understanding. It was completely impossible, and it should never be done. And if I needed reminding, just the reminder that these projects should always be in partnership like that. It should be a true partnership, because the learning is never one way. It's always going both ways. What you get out of it is always going both ways. It's not one way. And to respect that, always respect that as a fundamental value of working within this sector, and never forget that it is a privilege.
Yeah, definitely. What about yourself, Tina? You've had a bit of time to think about yours.
Yeah, I was thinking about it over all the places I've worked in and over the years, and it's going to be a fundraising one. And actually, it was one of your events.
Okay.
I don't know exactly which one it was because I'm not sure, but every time we came to these events over the past year, my bump was growing. I was getting more and more tired, more swollen, more giant. And I remember being really tired and sitting there, and we'd always be a bit like nervous before the fundraising ask. Yeah. And I remember this little boy putting his hand up, and I'm sure you remember that little boy as well. It's just incredible that someone that young would put his hand up and say he's not going to take his money or the money he gets, and he's going to ask his community to fundraise. It was just so moving. Yeah. And then the little boy wanting to meet the doctors, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Was that Manchester? I think that was Manchester.
Could have been.
Yeah.
I remember exactly which table he sat at, and I just thought, wow, you're just incredible. And it's this war has really, or a war, if you can call it that, how much it's impacted everyone and all communities, and just to say that I strongly believe that little by little every single pound does matter. Yeah. And that little boy really proved that.
Yeah.
I think after he stood up, so many more people gave money or put their hands up, and that's, for me, it's definitely a charity moment, especially as a fundraiser. It really touched me.
I think those events ended up being a bit like, I found them very therapeutic, and it ended up being like counselling sessions for everyone, because I remember at that time, obviously, like you said, it's not a war. It's a genocide. It's a conflict. It's just
hard to say.
It's hard to say what it is. Yeah, in that sense, it's just aggression and stuff and everything, and you're going through the protests, you're raising the money, you're doing whatever you can to do what we can to kind of help in any way that we can. And at that point, you're just like, what else can we do? You're just seeing the images, and nothing was changing, and still the case now. But the fact that we were able to get together and kind of like
and it meant so much to I think to our volunteers as well.
It really did.
And to IDEALS, and as an organization, we've grown, and it's the first time that we can breathe maybe a bit. Yeah.
But also, I mean, we've thanked you right from the beginning. I think the partnership between IDEALS and IslamicHelp has been fantastic right from the very beginning. I mentioned before about just feeling like minds and like-minded philosophy. I think that's been really important. But you've no idea how encouraging it is to sit in one of those events and see people making these incredibly generous contributions, and the amount. And I can't help but just keep totting it up in my head as going by and thinking I'd never been in an event like that. Not within it, to see people being mobilised and engaged to that extent, being as generous as they were. Massively encouraging, and I know Graham, Rosie, Basil, Ahmed, the others that came.
Those events hit record numbers in terms of fundraising. We've never hit those kind of numbers.
I've been to a lot of Muslim charity galas, events, and as a fundraiser, sometimes it would be quite cringe when you'd like, oh my God, no one's putting their hand up, and it would come to the point where at some events, they'd say £100 for one table, give £100 together, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Please, someone give. Otherwise, I'll give the bloody £100 now. But these events, it's the passion. It was just incredible, and I think Graham and even you, and I think everyone had doubts that we could fundraise, and I was like, no, we can. Yes, we can. We're going to do it.
I think everyone in the audience, when I kind of look back at the dinners, I felt like as everybody connected together in that room. There was a sense of unity, listening to the stories, and everybody wanted to be part of it, regardless of what age. Like you said, there were young children that were ready to become the future humanitarians and fundraisers, and everybody wanted to kind of make a difference. And I think those events were really, really positive.
No, you're right. It was collectively feeling that we could make a difference. Because the situation is so overwhelming, isn't it? Even for us, it's overwhelming. When you see it firsthand or through the media, it feels completely overwhelming. But they did give that sense as to, okay, collectively, we can come together and we can make a difference. The small difference.
And that money did make a difference. It has saved lives.
Yes.
And
saved
and
lives,
with our,
improved lives.
Sort of branding and marketing, again, we were talking about the wonderful partnership with Ideals, and we were saying we're sending surgeons into Gaza. Now, one of the segments that I want to move on to, we call it our Mythbuster section. Some of the tweets or things that we've read on social media, one of the questions was, why would you want to send doctors in Gaza when they have doctors in Gaza? Why are we risking and sending doctors from the UK into Gaza? How would you respond to that? I'll put that question to both of you.
Well, I mean, we would send them in even before there was violence at the moment. I think Ideals is all about capacity building and, empowering the people. And it's if you are from Gaza, it's very hard for you to just say, oh, I'm going to go study in the US tomorrow, or I'm going to come to the UK. And, going in and out has always been an issue for Palestinians. And so despite the fact that Ideals did have fellowships and we could get people out every now and then, it's not as simple. And so Ideals has always been about building capacity, empowering locals, working side by side with them. During difficult times, no matter how good of a surgeon you are, or an anesthetist or a nurse, you are exhausted. So, and it was sending doctors in wasn't just about doing the surgeries. It's about being there and supporting them to stand side by side, doing surgeries together when they were too tired, helping them with the most complicated cases because they were awake for days and days and days, giving them that little break so they could take a breather. Just for them to know that we didn't forget them, because we were going in with them before this as well. But I mean, Andy, I'm sure you have more to say about that, but that's what I felt. Why they would go in.
I mean, firstly, I can understand the question, and it's a good question to ask. The health system in Gaza is not a developing world health system. It's a system which is being de-developed as a result of the blockade and the occupation over such a long period of time. Really difficult to get training opportunities for the people working there. The medical schools, the nursing schools, the physiotherapy schools, whatever it is, training the next generation are under constant pressure, whether that's economic pressure or the next escalation in the conflict. It's just extremely difficult. And I think Tina's already touched on it. I think there are the two reasons. One is, in the longer term, building local capacity is hugely important. We've been working there since 2009 with the Ministry of Health as our primary partner, because there was a need to build capacity to manage major trauma and to provide limb reconstruction expertise. Even after 15 years or 14 years as the war began, we're still going through that process. Yeah. A specialist unit had been developed at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, which was fantastic. More people were being trained, rotating through that unit to gain additional expertise, and then some of those being identified as the future leaders of that trauma limb reconstruction service. But that's been completely decimated by what's happened. That unit has been destroyed, dismantled, the equipment has been either broken or dispersed elsewhere. So there's going to be a real need in the longer term to rebuild that. But also, at the moment, there are certain areas of expertise that are just not available within Gaza. And that's where our teams are able to do that, because we've enjoyed this luxurious training opportunities in this country for such a long period of time. We've got very well equipped, very well resourced units. So some of the work, the more complex reconstruction work, it needs people coming in from the outside to work with our local colleagues there. At the moment, it's really all about service delivery, but as and when the situation resolves a little bit, it'll be about training the next generation, building up that capacity locally, so that more and more people can be managed within Gaza and don't need to be transferred out and don't need people from the outside coming in to work alongside. But they are heroic.
Yeah.
They are absolutely heroic, from the paramedics going out and the ambulances picking up the injured. So many of them have been killed, injured, ambulances damaged or destroyed over the period of time. The people working within the emergency departments, the people working within the outreach teams, the surgical teams based in the few hospitals which are still able to function under the current circumstances. They are the heroes. They've been working virtually 24/7 for nearly a year now, without a break, constantly, day in, day out, stretched to the maximum. They need a break, and that's the other thing that our teams going in can do, is they can give them a break. They can take some of that strain away, if only for a few weeks, and then hope that others are coming in doing the same. But they're amazing. But they are exhausted. Many of them have also, certainly within all their families, they've suffered loss. An increasing number have been killed themselves, detained, tortured, killed in custody.
Lost everything they have.
Yeah, and lost everything that they have, and been displaced multiple times. So
I think it's like you said about all of those things are really important in terms of the specialities, the fact that there is a lack of these very specific, anesthesists, the plastic surgeons, what's the other one, sorry?
And the orthopedic surgeons.
Orthopedic surgeons, sorry.
Oh, Graham would not be happy.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologize and stuff. So these very specific ones, so there's a lack of those in Gaza at the moment in terms of the technical side of things. And like you mentioned though as well, I think one of the key things is that they just need to know that there's people that support them as well. And it's a very basic thing, like forget about anything else. It just...
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things as well, when people talk about the protests as well, they're like, oh, the protests are doing nothing. They're doing something.
Yeah.
They're sending a message to the people of Gaza that there's people that are with them. And that, if anything, is probably even the most important thing.
Yeah, I get a lot of that, because my sister goes a lot to protests, and I did before I got too big as well. And I would send photos to people, in Gaza, and they'd be like, it means so much to us, please don't forget us.
Yeah.
It's just, you're telling them you're not alone, or that's why when I just text them, like, I'm thinking of you.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't do much, but at least maybe, for that 1 second, it makes them feel that they're not all alone, because they must feel alone with what's happening.
One of my favorite videos that came from the first deployment was when you guys showed us that, I think it was your last day, and they brought you like some food and everything. It was really,
they're such nice people, honestly.
Yeah. Even though they had such little, like, obviously going through whatever it was and everything, they still, wanted to host you.
So knowing the Palestinians, I bet they didn't have anything themselves that day, and
they'd probably be hungry.
Shared their own personal
almost
food.
certainly that would have been the food that they would have been preparing for their own family. Otherwise, it is incredibly humbling, and there are small examples of that every single day. And you're absolutely right. Just simply being there is almost certainly the most important thing. I don't know whether Graham mentioned his meeting with the Deputy Minister in your chat earlier on.
I don't think you did.
So the Deputy Minister of Health is the most senior figure within the Ministry of Health in Gaza, because theoretically the Minister sits in Ramallah. And Yusuf Abou-Rish is the deputy minister. He's a paediatrician by background himself, very experienced. I first met him during the war in 2014. He'd just been appointed about a month before, and then this was his welcome to the role, was trying to manage the health system in the war at that time. And myself and Graham and Sarah and one or two of the others have known him, from that period of time. So for over 10 years now, I think we've become friends. We communicate informally as well, on the back of the support that's provided. And we met him during the first mission. He came to see us at the European Hospital, and that was very emotional. This time round, he came and he met up with Graham at Nassau Hospital, and they had an embrace. He was crying, and that wasn't about seeing Graham as an orthopedic surgeon. That was about meeting a friend and being reminded that that hadn't been forgotten, and having an opportunity maybe to release some of that emotion, because otherwise he has to be strong and he has to be the leader for the health systems that are there within Gaza. And Graham would probably be too modest to mention it himself, but I think that just is proof of your point, really, that actually simply being there is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Regardless of your position or who you are,
They're human.
you're human at the end of the day, and that's, I think, what it comes down to. Yeah. Nazim, shall we move on to our next segment, which I know you were going to ask Tina about this. So it was my first time.
Okay.
If you want to ask her the question.
So which one did we actually...
So we went on to my first time in Gaza. That's what we were going to move on to.
Yeah, that's fine, sorry. So this is another segment that we ask everybody. It's usually specific to each kind of guest and everything. I guess your first time in Gaza, what was it like? What were your kind of, feelings going in, your anticipation and everything like that?
My first time, I genuinely didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I was, you know that you go in through areas, you know that there's this long corridor, you don't know what to expect. That you walk for a while, you're briefed not to take photos of that. I guess I thought it was going to be scary. I guess I thought it was going to be dangerous, but it didn't feel like that to me. Like I said before, I always felt a lot safer in Gaza than I did in the West Bank. And the second you come into Gaza, I just fell in love with it. The people, the children, it's just such a beautiful place. I remember, the beach, it's like the type of beach that if it was somewhere else, it'd be hotel by hotel by hotel. I remember seeing people ride horses. And I remember then when I was at MAP, I said to the director of MAP Gaza, Fikr, I was like, I want to ride a horse. She's like, over my dead body.
Did you end up riding the horse?
No, I never rode a horse. I want to ride a horse or donkey, anything in Gaza. The food, the hospitality, the kindness, the teams, the MAP team in Gaza, just the most amazing team, so hardworking. I just loved the people in Gaza. I can't say enough about it. Wherever you went, you see all these kids on the street. Everyone had a smile on, and it breaks me inside because I know that's not what it's like now. Mm-hmm. Despite everything they've gone through in the past wars, there was always the smile, even though inside you could see the pain of some people, but they were still optimistic, and I know that's not the case now, but I love Gaza. I want to take my daughter Aya. If I can, I really want to go, and I want to show her what I fell in love with and I want to walk on the beach with her, and I hope that I'll be able to ride a horse on a beach in Gaza someday and share my favorite meal with her. That's one of my favorite Arab dishes, despite the fact that I grew up in Kuwait and people would be mortified. But yeah, it's the shrimp dish, and I still joke with my friends in Gaza now.
Yeah.
You love it as well. It's a spicy shrimp
Casserole.
Yeah, it's a Gazan thing, and it's divine. You would love it.
Inshallah, one day we'll have it together.
One day we have to go together, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Aya. That's my thing. We're going to sit on the beach and listen to the waves and eat that yummy dish.
We pray Aya goes to a rebuilt Gaza with,
Yeah.
people back in their homes and safety, inshallah.
I really, really, really hope so.
Inshallah.
It'd be my dream come true.
Inshallah. Andy, what about yourself?
First time in Gaza.
Yeah.
I bet yours wasn't as exciting as mine.
I don't think I can match all of that.
Sorry, I talked a lot for once.
No.
Yeah.
That's good. Back in 2009, I think John Beavis, who we spoke about before, had been out there once already in partnership with MAP, just looking at the situation and thinking about what we might be able to do there. And then I think the second time I went in with him with one or two others. Graham might well have been in that mission as well. But I'm going to turn it round maybe, because Tina's spoken a lot about the situation within Gaza itself and the incredible people there. One thing I'll add maybe is just the level of education, which people might not be aware of. The level of education in Gaza, I think, is almost unprecedented that I've seen anywhere in the world. Literacy levels.
Recruitment in Gaza
and because
is crazy.
there are so few opportunities, the recruitment rounds that I was involved with there, it was just staggering. You would have young people coming through with not only their degree and one master's, but two masters
Just
from
incredible.
very prestigious organisations within Gaza itself. Working incredibly hard, doing internships at a number of organisations, just trying to find the opportunity. And there wouldn't just be a few, there'd be 50, 60 people on a long list that you create, all with that level of background, all with those skills.
It's mind-blowing seeing.
I've never been involved in a recruitment round anywhere in the world quite like that, and been so humbled by the quality of the people coming through. But the thing maybe I'll add to what Tina has said is how difficult it is leaving Gaza. And that, when you talk to other people who have been there for the first time, it's so powerful because of this process, walking through when it was Erez in the north there. What is a military base, going through all the security checks there, and then this chain-linked corridor that you walk through no man's land. And then thinking now that no man's land used to be, I think it was about 100 to 150 meters inside the wall that surrounds the whole of the strip. I understand Israel have now extended that to 1 kilometer, to 1,000 meters. Everything is, so there's now 1,000 meter buffer zone on the inside of the wall all the way around Gaza, as well as a strip, I think, through the Wadi Gaza, which is effectively dividing the north from the south at the moment. But it was always there, and that it was difficult going in, but coming back out. And each time, normally I would then go on to Ramallah, go and do some additional work in the West Bank before returning to the UK. And it just felt so uncomfortable and surreal that evening, probably sitting in a cafe or a restaurant in Ramallah with freedom to move around, wander around, not have any concerns. But actually, your mind and your heart are still in Gaza. It was always the most difficult thing to do. And part of that, I think, obviously, is the gross unfairness of the situation that the people there are living within. But it's also for all the reasons that Tina was mentioning about how impactful it is there, the response you get from people, the hospitality shown, the kindness shown. And then when you leave that behind, and that's just by the grace of God, where you were born, the passport that you have in your hand, the freedom to move around, which is denied to everyone there. Leaving was actually the most powerful point.
I always thought that I could have been born here.
Yeah.
I always something you see those kids, and I always think it could have been me. One of those kids.
I travelled to Palestine in 2018, so the West Bank, for the Palestine Marathon. So I did the half marathon. I'm not much of a half marathon physique anymore, but just a challenge of, we had a group of 80 people, and just the challenges we faced at Tel Aviv airport, 8 hours just being stuck there.
Yeah.
From there, the checkpoints, and then even, obviously, we went to Al-Aqsa to pray, and our first prayer, we were actually told we weren't able to enter the compound. For me, that was like, oh my God, all my life I've been able to go to any mosque. I was able to pray anytime, but now I'm being told I can't actually even visit, the mosque and pray. For me, that short amount of period and having those restrictions just made us feel, because I remember the whole group came back to the hotel and we were talking like, we're just suffering over the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Imagine what Palestinians are going through on a day-to-day basis. It's, there's just no comparison at all.
I mean, just like for us, going in and out, whether to Gaza or through Israel, into the West Bank, it was just, there's always, they wanted you to have a really bad experience just so that you wouldn't return. And humiliation, I would say, would be the tactic. I was strip searched, things taken off me. And I'll never forget, once I came in, and Graham was also in that group. We went into Gaza together and we left together out of Gaza. And they did their mission. I was in to see the team. And when we were leaving, it was all male surgeons and myself. And when you leave out of Gaza, after you do that long corridor, then there's that thing, how you put your luggage on. So they scan it. And, all the surgeon stuff comes out. They're already, already. And we moved through as a team. And then, in this little baskets or whatever you'd call them, trays, starts coming my underwear one by one in each tray. God. And Graham's like, oh, let me help you. And I was like, Graham, go away, this is my underwear, turn around. And they were all like, oh, can we help? I was like, no, this is my lingerie coming out one by one. And it just,
Yeah.
it was so unnecessary. By my character, I'm raised, I'm from the Balkans. I was just like, yeah, whatever, just give it to me. I'm just pull it all out and packed it all in. But it was, to make it as difficult, as unpleasant as possible. I, I still think about it every now and then, but it didn't impact on me. But, if you are Palestinian and that happens to you on a regular basis, kind of like you said, you just witnessed it for a little moment. But if this is ongoing throughout your life, the impact it must have, it's... Yeah.
And some moments shine through that maybe brings that into sharper focus as to really just how lucky we are. One other moment that I can share, and that is, we mentioned a little bit about that we managed to get some people from Gaza out to the UK for training fellowships at King's Hospital, which is where Graham and Rosie and Sarah all work. And one of those who came over was a young nurse, well, not so young, he was in his mid-30s, called Nada, who's been heavily involved in our programme right from the very beginning. And at the end of the 8 weeks that he had in London, I just did a bit of a debrief with him before he returned to Gaza. Just going through things, checking, what went well, what didn't go so well, that kind of thing. And as always, I asked, what was the moment that stood out to him from that whole thing? So he was in mid-30s at that point. He'd never been out of Gaza before at all. This was the first time he'd ever left the Strip. A strip which is only 15 kilometres across at its widest point. You can drive from the top to the bottom in a couple of hours under normal circumstances. I mean, it's tiny. And I was thinking he would talk about something at the hospital that he saw there, because King's is a major trauma unit, incredibly busy hospital, or as a tourist in London and seeing some of those things for the first time. And none of those things. The thing that he pointed to, on the first weekend, I went for a walk. And he just set off from the little guest house that he was staying in near the hospital and started walking. And he had his ID and his passport and everything with him, but wasn't challenged. So the first thing it was just the fact that he could walk without being stopped and without hitting a checkpoint or without someone asking him what he was doing and where he was going. But the other thing, he kept walking, and he just kept walking around and he didn't know where he was going. And at one point you realised, despite what he had on his phone and a map that he had, he was lost, completely lost. And he said, I sat down at that moment and cried. And I didn't understand him to begin with. I thought maybe he was crying because he was lost and feeling a little bit scared. But no, he was crying because he'd never been lost before. Because he can't get lost in Gaza. And this was just this overwhelming, and even when I speak to him now, he's still working, he's still got a role at NAS Hospital at the moment. He'll remember the same thing, is 35 years old, he'd never been lost before because he'd never had the opportunity to get lost anywhere.
Can't imagine what that's like. Like, I'm guessing the fact that he was just able to walk without that fear of somebody
without fear
going at them, asking for ID,
stopping
them,
them,
harassing them,
blocking
whatever.
them.
Like, it's just like, you can't imagine, that's a privilege that we have. It's
massive.
How could that be a privilege for us? Like, as in, how is it the case that somebody else has to worry about that on a daily basis? Like, it's unfathomable. It's really, really crazy.
Crazy is a good word.
It really is. I'm going to ask our producer to put on a quote on the screen in a second. So we're going to move on to our final segment. We like to always end our sessions with a bit of positivity. So I'm going to read this out. It says, "The greatest good is what we do for others." And no other than good old Mother Teresa that mentioned.
The last one we did was from Taylor Swift, so I think we've got a better role model here.
we do
so
indeed.
Producer Saab, well done on this. Okay, all right.
Thank you for blaming me there, producer.
We know who's been buying these tickets that have been...
So Andy, look, you've been in the field and you've helped many people. When you look at what Mother Teresa's quoted there, what would you say that resonates in terms of for yourself personally?
It's a great quote for a start, coming from a wonderful person. And it's true. It is also a privilege. I'm not. I don't just say that. It really is. I think the opportunity to do something. I think to those events and all those people, they wanted to do something, and it is so frustrating, isn't it, when you feel you can't make a direct contribution yourself. To be able to do something, it is also an incredible privilege, and can only be good for me as well.
Tina, would you like to add anything to it?
Yeah, for me, I strongly believe that if you can make a difference even just to one person, no matter how big or small, it's really, really important. I really believe in that. I feel like I felt that when I was quite young. I got sick and I felt, mom, doctor, nurse, dad, doctor. I felt, in the best hands, and I was scared. I was really scared, and I was very lucky. And after that, I always said, even if I can make a difference to just one person, that will be enough. And I think you can make a difference, and there's so many different ways that we can help in Gaza. And I think with what you're doing with our partnership, we're making a big difference to a lot of people out there who really need it.
100%. And look, I'd like to personally thank both of you for being here today on in our podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you both here, listening to your stories and sharing your experiences. I'm sure Nazim will agree, because he's been liaising with both of you on a more regular basis. Nazim, any final thoughts or words from you?
I want to say a personal thank you to both of you, because and this partnership as well, just between IslamicHelp and IDEALS. I think I think I remember when we kind of set it up and everything like that, and like even for us, like people just like, oh, how do you know you're gonna get the people in at the time? I remember we were just, like I was just start talking to Tina, I was talking to Tina, I was like, do we know are we gonna get them in? Because at the time you're just like, you know, and everything. But then I was just like, I was saying to everybody, yeah, Islamic Help. I was saying it to even my team members. I was just like, you know, if we, you know, commit to this and we don't get them in, it's not going to look good for us. I was like,
I remember.
I go, guys,
no pressure
look,
now.
I go, guys, look, I'm working with, like, alhamdulillah, we're working with the right people. We're working with the guys that if anybody's going to get in, it's going to be them. Actually, forget that. If anybody's going to get in, it's going to be Tina.
I remember being in the boardroom and people saying to you, will it happen? Is it going to happen? And blessed Naz was just sitting there going, leave it with me. I can make it happen.
Because there was a lot that was up in the air, but I knew that, you know, and with it, we did say to people, look, if worse comes to worse, we will divert the funds. It'll go to Gaza one way or another and stuff like that. But I knew that we were working with the right team. And I think this is what the partnership works like. I think we mentioned it to you guys before, like, technically, like, we're not medical experts in that. We're not from the field, but you guys are. Your teams are. The people that you have, they've been to Gaza so many times. All these kind of things, and you know, I think Graham was mentioning it. You've mentioned it as well, that you guys have been a bit quiet about, you know, the work you do because of the sensitivities around the work, and understand it. And we're able to go out there into the communities, fundraise, and support you guys to go in. And we've got that commitment now for, you know, the next few years to send in teams on a regular basis to make sure that this work continues on. Because
it will be needed.
Yeah, because it will be needed.
It's going to be needed, for years to come.
We're just grateful for this partnership and working together, and
we really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks once again. I'm going to end with the podcast by thank you now, viewers, for watching us and for tuning in. Hopefully they'll take good note of the quote that we had from Mother Teresa, which is, the greatest good is what we do for others. Hopefully that will inspire other people to do good. And again, until next time, thanks for tuning in.